VBA's message box function basically looks like this. It's a very easy way to get a dialog box like this, so you don't have to design it or anything. It's already pre-programmed. And this way you can easily communicate with the user and even get simple responses like okay, yes, no, or cancel. You can use this, for example, to inform them that the macro has finished running, or to ask them, like in this example, if they're sure they want to do something. Just keep in mind that the message box is a function, so your macro is actually paused until the user provides a response. Now you can use the message box function by itself if you're just informing the user about something, or if you need a response from them, it's best to keep the result of this message box in a variable. And here I've mentioned don't use brackets, use brackets. We're going to see an example of this. So if you're just informing the user about something, you don't need to capture the response in a variable, right? So you don't need brackets because you don't have an equal sign. But the moment you have the equal sign, because you're assigning the answer to a variable, you have to use this function by using brackets. I've provided 2 examples here, but we're going to go to our Excel workbook and practice them together. So let's jump to tab message box. Our first task is to create a welcome message for the user. Okay, so here we're just informing them. Our second task is to create a macro that's going to clear these values. But before we clear them, we want to double check with the user if they're sure they want to clear. So here we need to get a response from them. Let's bring up Visual Basic, Alt F11. First, create a simple sub-procedure. Let's call it simple MSG box for the welcome message. I'm going to switch to single procedure view and collapse this. To write the message box function, you can directly type it in if you remember the syntax, and if you don't, you can get to it through IntelliSense by typing in VBA dot, and it's directly in the global library, or you can get to it through going through the correct compartment, and that's in the interaction class dot message box. Okay, so regardless of how you type this, you get the same result. The arguments for message box are the following. So first is a mandatory argument called prompt. The rest are optional. Now let's say our prompt here is hello. Okay, that's all I need to type. I'm going to press enter. That's the message box in its simplest form. So when I press play, we get hello. Now let's take a look at the other arguments. We can define a button style, and we can also define what the default buttons are. But in this case, since we're just informing them, we don't need more than one button, we can skip this argument. So notice that I'm going through this like a formula, but you have the option of also referencing the arguments that you want. Next argument here is the title, and I'm going to put in a welcome here. The rest, help file, context, I don't need, and we can see here that the result of a message box is saved in something called VB message box result. Right? That's something that we need if we are going to capture the answer. So if we had more than one button here. So in this case we don't, so it's enough just to do this. Then we can also personalize this a little bit, and we can do hello and combine it with the username. So I'm going to get to it through IntelliSense using application.username. Okay, so let's run this. We say hello Leila Garani, and the title is something we change to welcome. Otherwise you just see Microsoft Excel there. Okay, we can even define a button for this. So I'm going to insert a form control, assign it to the macro, call this welcome, and you can even add symbols to your buttons. Okay, just make sure that the correct one is in front. So I'm going to right mouse click, bring to front, add this here, assign a macro also to this symbol, and then group them together. Okay, so when we click this, we see hello Leila Garani. Now later we're also going to learn about events. So if you ever wanted a welcome message to pop up every time the user opens your Excel workbook, you need to work with Excel's events. And that's something that we cover in a future section. Now let's just type this up another way by referencing the arguments separately. So I'm going to do prompt, then you need the colon and the equal sign. And then I want to take this one, so I'm going to copy this and also add a dot in the end. So don't forget that whenever you're combining variables with text, you do need that quotation mark. Now, if you want to go to the next line, we can use VB new line. And let's add a second text called thanks for stopping by. Now I'm going to add space and underscore to go to the next line. The title is welcome. Okay, let's just comment this one out and let's run this. Hello, Lady Granny, thanks for stopping by. Now let's move on to task 2. We want to clear values here, but before we want to double check with the user. For this, I'm going to create a new sub called yes, no message box. Now this time we want to capture the result of the message box function. So I'm going to dim a variable that I'm just going to call answer as VB message box result. So now we need to assign it. We're going to assign answer to message box. Now because we're on the right side of the equal sign, we need the brackets here. Let's put in, are you sure about this? We want to add special buttons, so let's go with VB yes, no. Then if you want to add more styles to this, just put in the plus sign. We could do VB question to get the question mark in the form, and we could assign a default button. So yes would be default number 1. That means that that button is highlighted. And if we want no to be highlighted, we have to go with default button 2. So in this case, I'm going to go with default button 2. For the title, I'm going to add clear cells. Okay, so now we need to see what the user clicked on and decide on the outcome that we want to take. So if answer is VB yes, then we want to clear that range. Else, we want to leave the sub. Let's now also create a button for this one and assign our macro to it. Let's click this. Are you sure about this? Notice that the default button is no, so if I press enter, it's going to exit the sub. Now I can go with my keyboard to yes and press enter, or go with my mouse. I'm going to press enter, the values are cleared. So that's how you can use VBA's message box function to interact with the user.